Joining us right now is the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget President, Maya MacGuineas. Maya, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Morning, Maria.
Your reaction to the proposal, Maya?
So I think it's terrific that we're moving on tax reform and big, fundamental, structural tax reform. It is long overdue. And a lot of the components of the tax reform are exactly right. We want to have something that will simplify the tax code, enhance our competitiveness, grow the economy. Bringing the corporate rate down in particular is something we really need to do given who we compete with around the world and their tax structures. All that said, if this plan is not affordable, and by all indications so far it's not anywhere close, and it ends up adding to the debt to the tune of trillions of dollars, which again so far it looks on course to do, that will undermine the growth effects. You'll have improvement in growth from better tax reform and a negative consequence on growth from a higher debt level. So what we need to do is take this outline and figure out how we're going to pay for it.
Well, what do you think? I mean, do we really know how much it's going to cost, given the fact that we don't really know the deductions yet? I mean, we don't know a lot of the details within it.
No. It's a one-pager, it's bullets, it's a structure, it's the high-level objectives, and that's great because it gives us the opportunity to fill in the details. The Secretary of Treasury before, the Republican leadership, they've all said that revenue neutral is the objective here, and I agree. If that's the objective, we can really do something positive for growth. So then we have to start to look at how do you offset those costs? And there are actually many, many possibilities. One good thing they did say yesterday was they are looking at broadening the base, hopefully quite significantly, on the individual side, getting rid of a lot of the tax deductions that exist. And that's good for simplicity in the tax code. They can do a lot of base broadening on the corporate side as well. They can also pair this with other revenues or even spending cuts. There's a whole lot of ways to pay for things, and it's hard. So you'll have a lot of people kind of in the free lunch camp arguing, don't worry about paying for it, it'll just magically fix itself. Let's really make this a pro-growth plan, and let's add the offsets along with it so we have a full plan not to balloon the debt, but to vastly reform the tax code.
Hey, Maya, it's Mitch Rochelle. One question is the big deduction for state and local taxes, which is coming out. I worry that that could be highly politicized as New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and California, four blue states, are going to be adversely impacted when their high taxes can't be deducted. What's your thoughts on the politics around this as this one-pager makes its way into the form of a bill?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, the politics of paying for things is never good, and that's why we don't. That is why we have nearly a $20 trillion debt, because any time we say, what about this as a way to pay for something, the political response is, well, that's really hard and people don't want to do that. I do think it's why we have to look throughout the entire tax code. The state and local deduction is a great thing to have on the table. I know that the high tax states are going to object, but the low tax states are subsidizing the high tax states, so there's plenty of arguments that we can think through, and it's an economic argument that we should welcome for the betterment of the tax code. There are a lot of other deductions that we should be looking at closely. They said nothing on the home mortgage interest deduction. There's a case to be made that that home mortgage interest deduction doesn't do what it's supposed to do, certainly if it's subsidizing vacation homes. But you can go through every tax break and think about why, if it enabled you to bring rates down lower, it would be good to consider whether we can reform it or eliminate it, all, again, for the betterment of growing the economy through real paid-for structural tax reform. But you make the right point. Lobbyists will be lining up to oppose all of the hard choices in tax reform. And, again, there will be so many people who say, don't worry about it. This will pay for itself. Remember, when Reagan put in a huge tax cut, he had to get rid of about 40% of it because it didn't pay for itself. It ended up increasing the debt quite significantly.
Right. We used to be able to deduct the interest on our credit card debt, and Ronald Reagan got rid of that, so it's not impossible to do this. Maya, you are in D.C. Do you think that the mood is in place to really tackle this? As Jason Riley says, there are 10 lobbyists for every line of the tax code.
You know, the mood in Washington is competitive, partisan, and not focused on really working together to get high-level objectives done, which is what we need to be doing. One of those objectives is clearly growing the economy. Tax reform needs to be a part of that. Another of those objectives is tackling our big debt. What President Trump said when he was running for office is he was going to grow the economy and use that growth to help get control of our massive debt. If we're now talking about using that growth to pay for tax cuts or other things, we are still on track to borrow at least $10 trillion over the next decade. I know this president who wants to be, his legacy to be having overseen the biggest tax cut. He doesn't want his legacy to be overseeing the biggest expansion of the debt. So while the mood is always to say, oh, we can't do that, that's too hard, we're going to need the political leadership to really do something important, impressive, and lasting in terms of the overall fiscal legacy and economic growth legacy. And that is going to take some changes in Washington.
And that's as interest rates are going up, Jack Otter.
Maya, Jack Otter from Barron's here. So I think the political problems, the hurdles that he's going to have to clear are certainly high indeed. But if forget about that for a second, what do you think the most economically efficient way would be to lower these rates but still make it somewhere close to revenue neutral? What loopholes would you plug?
Okay, so on the corporate side, I would look at that interest deductibility. That's something they have been talking about or not. I'm not completely opposed to the BAT. There are other options that are out there, but I do think looking further at that, I certainly think the rate reductions and changing how we tax internationally is going to do a lot of good. We have to broaden the base. There is no way to broaden the corporate tax base enough to get us down to that 15% rate. So if we still want to do that, we have to get the revenue from other places. On the individual side, remember, all told, there's $1.6 trillion in revenue that is lost because of tax breaks every year. Let's get rid of as many of those as possible. Let's start with the idea of getting rid of all of them and then figure out which ones we want to keep and put them back in. Second thing, there's other revenue options. I think that they said they're not still considering things like a carbon tax or a VAT, but I think they should, because you could make huge structural reforms by replacing a lot of the income tax code with some other pay-fors. And another thing that you can do is you can cut spending. You can, as you're reforming the tax code, offset those costs by bringing spending down. This is a Republican administration, Senate, House. They've been saying they want to control spending for a long time. Big challenge for us is that the president has taken entitlement reform off the table.
Right.
We really can't afford not to consider that. Let's put everything on the table. Let's do a whole budget, figure out how much we can afford, and really do a big comprehensive growth plan for the economy.
I don't know that that's coming this
no,
time around.
Probably not.
Yeah, Maya,
I hope Donald Trump calls you. Those are a lot of great ideas.
Great ideas,
Thanks,
Maya. Thanks so much for weighing in on this. We appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Maya
You too.
MacGuineas joining us this morning.